Hello class, this is lesson 18.1, volume of prisms and cylinders. In this lesson you're going to learn how to apply the volume formula for prisms and cylinders, and then going forward in the future lessons we're going to learn how to find the volume of pyramids, cones, and spheres. But for this particular lesson we want to find out what is a prism, what is a cylinder, and how do we find the volume. So let's get started. Now, when we're looking to find the volume of an object, we're looking to find the volume of a three-dimensional object, such as a cube. So how do we find the volume of a cube? Well, a cube is a square on all sides, and squares have equal length. So what we do is we find the length, the width, and the height, but because all sides are equal to each other in a cube, the volume formula for a cube is volume is equal to the side cubed. So side times side times side. Now when we're talking about a rectangular prism, now we're going to be using a formula where the volume is equal to the length times the width times the height. So length, the width, and then the height. And now we're going to be talking about other oblique and right prisms. Now when we're talking about oblique and right prisms, we use this main formula where the volume is equal to the base times the height, but the base, notice this is capital B, the base means the area of the base, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, so to start, we're going to do a quick example that's already done for us, but I'm just going to follow along. Okay, so in this example, a shark tank at the aquarium has the dimensions to the right. Here's a shark tank, where we have the length is 60. We have, actually no, the length is 120. The width is 60, and then the height is 8. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the volume formula for a rectangular prism, length times width times height. 120 times 60 times 8 gives us 57,600. Now the units are feet cubed. When we multiply feet times feet times feet, that is feet to the third power, or feet cubed. So in all of your volume problems, you're going to always have a unit cubed, whether it is feet cubed, whether it is centimeters cubed, inches cubed. Just remember to put the unit after our answer. Okay, now we're going to look at an example of a triangular prism. So in the triangular prism, what we always want to do is we always want to find the base of the triangular prism, and the base is always going to be at the triangle. So let me just write that here. The base is always the triangle. So when using this formula, volume is equal to base times height, this capital B is the formula that we want to use to find the area of the base. Now, since we're saying that triangle is the base, how do we find the area of a triangle? Well, we have to use the formula 1/2 base times height. Now, I don't want you to get confused with this base and this base. This little case base is the base of the triangle. So just focus on the triangle. The base of the triangle is 3. The height of the triangle is 3. So that's not the height of the object or the base of the object. That's just of the triangle. So we start there. To find the area of the base, we have 1/2 times 3 times 3, which gives us 4.5 yards squared. Now, the reason why this is squared is because when we're finding area, area is always squared. And remember that volume is always cubed. The units for volume are always cubed. So when we find the area of a base, those units are squared. But now look at what happens. We have the base area times the height of the object. So that is this height of the object. And that is equal to 13.5 yards cubed. Okay, so now let's work on two problems. The first one is a rectangular prism. And the formula that we're going to be using is the volume. So V is equal to length times width times height. So I'm going to say the length is 4. So I have 4, the width is 2, and the height is 5. 4 times 2 times 5. Well, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 5 is 40. So we end up with 40. Now, because this is centimeters, our answer is going to be cubic centimeters. So volume is equal to 40 cubic centimeters. Okay, next, for problem number 2, we have a triangular prism. And the formula that we're going to be using for this is the volume is equal to the area of the base times the height. So, because we want the base to be the triangle, follow my finger. So this is going to be the base. We're on the bottom. This is going to be the base. How do we find the area of this triangle? Well, we're going to say that the base is equal to 1/2 the base of the triangle times the height of the triangle. So the base of the triangle is 3, the height of the triangle is 4. So this is 1/2 times 3 times 4. Now 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 4 is 12. And 12 divided by 2 is 6. So the base is equal to 6 centimeters squared. So now that I have the base, I know the height of the object is 1 because as you can see, it's going up 1. The height is 1 and the base is 6. So now I could complete this formula. The volume is equal to 6 times 1, which is 6 centimeters cubed. And I just want to mention that this step right here, this was the area of the base formula, or the area of the triangle. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. So the next part of this lesson is talking about how to find the volume of a cylinder. So a cylinder is something that looks like this, and notice that we have circular bases, meaning that the base of a cylinder is a circle. Now, a couple things about circular bases, about Okay, on this part of the lesson, we're going to learn how to find the volume of a cylinder. So notice that with the cylinder, we have circular bases. And from the last section where we found the area of the base, what we have to do with the circle is use the area of a circle formula. Now the area of a circle is pi r squared. So that is why we see this equation as the volume is equal to pi r squared times the height, because this comes from the volume is equal to the base times the height, the base area. Now, all we need to find the volume of a cylinder is the radius. Now remember, the radius is the distance from the center of a circle to the end point of a circle, and the height of the object. Now, having all those things, we could find the volume, and also we're going to be using 3.14 for pi. So let's look at the first example that they give us, which is about this can of beans. They want us to find the volume. So they tell us that the radius is 1.5 inches. So let me just kind of draw that. So again, from the center to the edge, this is 1.5 inches. And then they tell us that the height is 4 inches. So the height from the top to the bottom is 4. So then using this formula, we have 3.14 times 1.5 squared times 4. Now you could actually type all of this in the calculator at once and you will get a number like this, 28.3. Okay, now the next part is talking about oblique prisms and oblique cylinders. So an oblique prism and oblique cylinder are objects that are slanted, and to find the volume of these slanted objects, we still use the base area. So you find the area of the base, and we find the vertical height. So we don't use the slanted height, we use the vertical height, the height from the top of the object to the ground. And we see that here as well. So let's look at a few examples of oblique objects. So in the first example, we have an oblique cylinder with the radius of 12 and a height of 45. So from the center of the circle to the end point, that is 12, and the vertical height is 45. And we use the same formula. The volume is equal to pi r squared. So 3.14 times 12 squared times 45 is 20,347.2. Okay, for problem number 3, we have an oblique prism. They tell us that the base area, the area of the base is 75. And the height, so not this height, but the vertical height of this object is 25. So to find the volume, we do the base area times the height. 75 times 25 gives us 1,875. Okay, now it's your turn to try a problem, and if you want to pause the video here to give yourself a chance to work it out and then press play to watch the answers, you could do so. So in this problem, we have a radius of 2. So again, from the center to the edge, this is 2. And then we have a vertical height of 10. And we're going to be using the volume is equal to pi r squared times the height formula. And I'm going to replace pi with 3.14. I'm going to replace the radius with 2. And I'm going to replace the height with 10. So now with your calculator, you're going to type all of this to find your solution. So on my calculator, I have 3.14 times 2 squared times 10 gives me 125.6. centimeters cubed. Now I actually noticed that they want the answer in terms of pi. Now this answer is not in terms of pi. Actually this answer is the actual answer. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to find the answer in terms of pi. So again, we're going to be doing the same problem, but the only difference is I'm leaving pi alone. So all we're doing is 2 squared times 10, which is 4 times 10, which is 40 pi. So the volume is 40 pi centimeters cubed. Now, 40 pi and 125.6 are the same. The only difference is I multiplied by 3.14 here, and on this one I left it as pi. Okay, so the last part of this lesson, we're going to be talking about composite figures. Now, a composite figure is made up of simple shapes that combine to create a complex shape. So in this example here, this is a composite figure, but it's made up of two shapes. It's made up of a cylinder on top, and it's made up of a rectangular prism on the bottom. To find the volume of this composite figure, what we do is we find the volume of each figure independently, and then we take the sum to find the final volume. So this example is already worked out for us, but I'm going to kind of walk us through it. They start off with the volume of the prism, and to find the volume of the prism, they do the length of the prism times the width times the height. 14 times 8 times 12 is 1,344 feet cubed. And now focusing on the cylinder, we have a radius of 4 and a height of 8. So we have pi 4 squared times 8, which ends up being 402. Then the last step is adding the two volumes. 402 plus 1,344 is 1,746. Okay, we're going to look at one more example. Now in this example, this is a composite figure as well, but the only difference is we have to remove a certain volume within the volume. So imagine you have a roll of paper towels, and with the roll of paper towels you notice that there's a hollow center inside, and that is what this is. So what we have is a large cylinder and a smaller cylinder. To find the volume of this object, what we do is we find the volume of the entire cylinder and subtract it by this small cylinder. Now they want us to give our answer in terms of pi and also use 3.14, but this is not going to be used to the last step. So let's start with the large cylinder. So the height of the large cylinder is 11. Now what is the radius? Now they kind of tell us that the distance from this endpoint to this point is 2, then this is 2, and then this is 2. So the entire distance of this cylinder is 6, and what we call that is the diameter. If the diameter is 6, then the radius has to be half, which is 3.14, or I'm sorry, which is 3. So we have pi times 3 squared times 11 gives us 99 pi. Now we're going to leave that answer alone and then move on to the next part. So for the next smaller cylinder, what is the radius of the smaller cylinder? Now, if the distance from one end to the other is 2, then the radius has to be 1. And the height is still 11, so we have pi times 1 squared times 11, which ends up being 11 pi. Now, what we're going to be doing in the next step is subtracting 99 pi minus 11 pi. 99 pi minus 11 pi is 88 pi. Now, this is one of our answers in terms of pi, and then if we multiply 88 times 3.14, we end up with 276.3. So I just want to show you 88 times 3.14 ends up being that number. Okay, so we're going to use these two examples to help us solve these two problems. One where we are adding 2 volumes, and the other where we are subtracting 2 volumes. Okay, so now let's look at problem number 1. Now, for problem number 1, we have a rectangular prism on the bottom, and then we have a triangular prism on the top. So let's find the volume of the rectangular prism first. So the volume of, I'm going to put R for the rectangular, is equal to length times width times height. So 16 times 5 times 4. Now 16 times 5 times 4, let's find out what that is. That ends up being 320 meters cubed. So next, let's find the volume of the triangular prism. So I'm going to put VT for triangular. Now remember, the formula for a triangular prism is the base times the height. Now the base is the area of the triangle times the height of the object. And if we look at this diagram here, the base of the triangle is 16 because this is 16, and the height is 6. So what we do is, on the side here, well, let me just write it right here. The base is equal to 1/2 times the small base times the height of the triangle, which is 1/2 times 16 times 6. So 1 times 16 times 6 divided by 2 ends up being 48. So I'm going to use this number here. The volume of the triangular prism is 48 times the height of the object, which would be this length here, which is 5. Now 48 times 5 is 240 meters cubed. So now that we have the triangle and then we have the rectangular, to find the final volume, so I'm going to call this VF for final volume, is equal to VR plus VT. So 320 plus 240 ends up being 560 meters cubed. Okay, moving on to problem number 2. For problem number 2, I have a cube, and then I have a cylinder. So with the cube, I could use the formula length times width times height. So I'm going to write volume of the cube is equal to length times width times height. Now because a cube has all equal sides, this is the same as 8 times 8 times 8, which is 512. So that is the first volume. The second volume is a cylinder. Now, remember, to find the volume of a cylinder, we need the radius, and then we need the height. Now, if I was to draw a dotted line across the middle of the cylinder, what would the radius be, or what would half the diameter be? If the diameter is 8, then the radius has to be 4, and the height of the object is 8. So the volume of, I'm gonna write cube here, of the cylinder is pi times the radius squared times the height. So what we're gonna have is 3.14 times 4 squared times 8. Okay, so using the calculator, 3.14 times 4 squared times 8 ends up being 401.9. So the volume of the cylinder is this. Now to find the final volume, we're going to do the volume of the cube minus the volume of the cylinder, which is 512 minus 401.9. And that ends up being, I'm going to write our final answer here. The volume is 110.1 feet cubed. So that completes lesson 18.1. Now for your homework, what you need to do is find volume of some rectangular prisms, triangular prisms, cylinders, and then of a composite figure. After you finish that, then you're going to be asked to find the volume of these figures on the checkpoint. Thank you. Have a good day.